A gay parade has been planned to take place in Jerusalem in the coming days. Why is this necessary and what will be accomplished? No other sexual minority takes it to the streets proudly advocating their sexual orientation. In addition, the heterosexual people don't feel a special need to publicly display their bedroom behavior. But for some reason the gays and the lesbians seem to consider it worthwhile. The matter could have been excused much more easily some decades ago, when the world was still a spiritually cleaner place and the people's intimate relations was not a subject deemed appropriate to be advertised or even spoken about in public. Especially when the sexual relationships between males was condemned in the harshest language. These deviant people felt that they were being afflicted and left without human rights. Therefore, after years of demonstrations and media brainwash, the world could no longer struggle against this and eventually broke under the pressure. But now, today, when most of the Western nations are already handing out marriage and adoption rights for gay and lesbian couples, what can be achieved by this sort of a parade? If the aim is purely to offend people who want to live without having to expose their families and children to the pollution and licentiousness of the world, then why the trouble? Thus, the motive must be something deeper. Although the media, school awareness classes and various handouts and guides have already normalized practically all that is unnatural, the common men still feel intense guilt exposing themselves to acts which they know to be completely against logic and contrary to human anatomy. If a man and a woman together are able to produce offspring and it is not necessary for them having to explain to the world why they live together in an intimate relationship, then why should one have to fight for a cause which every normal human at least subconsciously understands to be wrong? The reason for this is as follows. A person knows the act is wrong but refuses to suppress his desires. After all, he lives here only once. He doesn't believe in the afterlife or heavenly judgment. Then why can't he therefore be allowed to enjoy his short existence here in the manner he chooses? But the conscience will not leave him alone. Something is wrong. That is why he seeks the company of like-minded people engaged in a similar lifestyle, and this brings him a peace of mind. But it is not enough. The world outside still fights against him. The world has too many people who disapprove of his chosen way of living. Therefore, it must be made public and with a big ceremony. Because when more and more people eventually give in and offer him their silent approval, even if reluctantly, he can go on and continue on his unnatural path with his mind finally at ease. Resistance has to be defeated, and only when a person gets the world quiet, the sound of his own conscience is likewise quieted. Only a short while ago, a person was not required to justify why he was against homosexuality. Now anyone who dares to speak against the issue receives a tidal wave of accusations of intolerance straight in his face. And the popular comment that it does not belong to anyone what happens in the bedrooms of others loses completely its meaning when everyone is forced to hear and see in broad daylight what unfortunately does go on in other people's bedrooms. Making this kind of a video would not have been necessary if everyone really kept their sex lives to themselves. A person who questions the criticism on unnecessary public displays of sexuality needs to understand that even if he himself would allow, for example, his own children to see the kind of behavior that the past generations would not have practiced even in the privacy of their own homes, there's still people left in the world who do not want to expose themselves, and in particular their young innocent children, to see people who behave in full daylight, completely without shame, as the wild beasts do. The human being is distinguished from an animal by the ability to speak and also by the ability to curb their behavior and their desires. Why does this barrier need to be broken, particularly in a public place? Why isn't anything sacred anymore? And why, of all the places, Jerusalem, the holy city for the three major religions of the world? Why not New York, Berlin, or maybe London? Because a gay parade in any of these filthy cities would not cause even as much as an eyebrow to be lifted. It is already commonplace, everybody got used to it. Thus it must be brought to a city where it is sure to attract attention and where it will most certainly offend some people. And Jerusalem, unlike for example the Islamic cities of Mecca and Medina, where a similar expression would bring a death penalty to all its participants, is a free democratic city where almost all forms of debauchery is secured by the anti-religious legislations. Sexual relations between men are presented in the Bible in a section that also deals with other types of forbidden intimate relationships. The following extract is from the book of Leviticus, from the chapter 20. And a man who commits adultery with another man's wife, committing adultery with the wife of his fellow, the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death. And a man who lies with his father's wife has uncovered his father's nakedness. Both of them shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon themselves. And a man who lies with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall surely be put to death. They have committed a depravity. Their blood is upon themselves. And a man who lies with a male, as one would lie with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood is upon themselves. And a man who lies with an animal shall surely be put to death, and so on. The above list describes relationships that any normal person would find extremely repulsive, and still one act is removed from the list and gets exonerated, and its practitioners are not even in the slightest ashamed to publicly advertise it to the world. Even if a person didn't believe in the Bible, and even if he does not want to hear one sentence from it, and even if he is shocked by the punishments for carrying out these horrendous acts, he has to acknowledge that these abominations mentioned here are simply irrational and against common sense, and yet one is taken off the list and transformed into an honorable deed. And God says, "You shall not follow the practices of the nations that I am sending away from before you, for they committed all these sins, and I was disgusted with them."